Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And this is going to be a relatively quick episode. I've gotten busy at work this week. I had a pretty good run of there, putting out a lot of videos over the last week and a half or so, but the pace is probably going to slow a bit over the next week or two, unfortunately. But wanted to respond to some thoughts to our last episode, specifically from Not My Four Ply and Jackhammer Possessor, and I know that several others of you have shared some thoughts with us on what we should do in international amateur free agency. But that's not going to be the focus of this brief episode. What Not My Four Ply and Jackhammer Possessor brought up was a really good point that I hadn't necessarily explicitly thought of that I want to explore more. And you may remember that not too far back, we got an offer we could not refuse in my mind to trade away an excellent reliever for one of the top prospects in baseball. And although we don't think that prospect is necessarily really the fourth best prospect in baseball, in fact, we're pretty confident that he is not anywhere close to being the fourth best prospect in baseball. The viewers suggested that maybe we look at flipping him for someone who is more to our suiting, and I think that's a great idea. So I want to explore a few of the options that I see available here, and maybe for those of you who are going to watch the episode and gracious enough to share your thoughts with me, maybe let me know what direction you would go. First, the last time we checked in on the team, our farm system was middle of the pack in all of baseball, which, given that we are typically and have typically been picking at the end of the first round and at the end of every round for most of the last 15 years. And we've, with all but one exception, I think, had the minimum international amateur free agent budget for most of the last 15 years. The fact that we had a middle of the pack farm system is actually pretty respectable. Now, granted, I would think that my big human brain at this point should be able to outperform the AI of the game. I think we've still got maybe 2 or 3 years till the machines take over and we're all living in a post-apocalyptic Terminator 2 type hellscape. But right now, at this moment, I think I can still outwit the AI in OOTP 24. So a long-winded way of saying that, me being middle of the pack despite picking at the end is probably more of an expected result than any great skill by myself. But now you can see we are ranked third out of 32 teams overall in terms of our farm system, and that's entirely driven by the addition of Brenton Burill, because we haven't done anything else to our farm system since we checked in a couple of months ago after the regular season. So Burill, as we talked about in the last episode, player who was drafted just a couple of years ago, hasn't made out of rookie ball, almost 24 years old. If he fully develops, he's a very good major league hitter. Perennial all-star who could possibly put together an MVP season if everything came together, with 65 contacts, 65 home run power, 65 eye, good speed, good bunter, pretty good range in the outfield. Given that he's almost 24 and he's got that low adaptability and work ethic, it's very conceivable that his development is more similar to what we've been experiencing with our friend, the infielder, Mr. Contreras, over the last few years, who similarly has had low adaptability and low work ethic. And he's not reaching the peak of the potential that we thought he had when we first acquired him. And he's also making the gains that he does make incredibly slowly. So when I look at this profile, I don't see a guy who's the fourth best prospect in all of baseball. I see a guy who maybe might go fourth in a draft in a really poor draft year. You know, we look back at his history and he went seventh overall a year and a half ago. So what I'm going to do is, and what I've already done in a different session of the game, even though I haven't moved forward yet, is shop Mr. Burill and talk through a few of the more interesting options that I think are out there. And then I'm also going to do a couple of player searches to highlight a couple of players that weren't necessarily offered to us for him, but that I think we could conceivably get for Burill. Might need to add in a little more to get those deals done. But just players who I think would be a better potential fit for our organization than him. And then if any of you are willing to share your thoughts on which direction you would go if you were faced with this decision, it's always helpful for me to benefit from the wisdom of our loyal and intelligent and good-looking viewers. And not surprisingly, when we go and we shop Mr. Brenton Burill, we get a long and relatively impressive list in terms of the potential of some of these prospects that have been offered for him. Want to highlight several of these players that I'm having at the short list to potentially go after. One is the starting pitcher, Zion Gooseberry. Awesome name. Number 39 prospect in baseball. Great personality traits. Really good stamina. Really good at holding runners. Already has 3 major league quality pitches. Excellent movement. Above average control. His stuff is not great, but if that changeup continues to develop, it will get better. 12-4 with a 2.60 ERA and high A ball last year. A little older at 23 years old, but certainly a player who could be in the major leagues at some point this next year. I think I'd probably have him split the year between AA and AAA and then promote him to the majors in September. But a guy who, while maybe not being a number 1 starter, looks like he could be a very important part of a good rotation for many years to come. Different direction than a starting pitcher would be another prospect who's a little older, 24 years old, and that's Chris Mass, a right fielder, and he's pretty interesting to me. He's durable. He's adequate defensively and adequate on the base paths, but potentially has plus contact and excellent home run power. He's a left-handed hitter and 65 contact and 75 home run power against right-handed pitching. So he's really a platoon guy when you look at the massive difference in the splits, but a guy who could be a really dominant offensive force for 120 games started a year. He's 24 years old. He's already spent 2.5 years in the majors, and he's put up a 110 WRC plus over that time, but pretty significant improvement each year, coming off a year where he hit 267 with 38 homers and 117 ribbies. He is going to be heading to arbitration next year, where he's set to make about $4 million. And he'd certainly be a 8-figure guy within a season or two after that. But I think he's a real interesting bat that is potentially plug and play at the major league level. Another older guy that intrigues me is Brendan Robards, a 25-year-old shortstop. The bat with him is nothing special. Probably a bit below average for a major league bat, but it's not a horrible bat. And when you combine that with his 70 range, 80 error, 65 arm, and 70 turn double play ratings, he's really got the look of a perennial Gold Glove winner. And you can see at this point, he's already won Gold Gloves in each of the last 2 seasons. 79 WRC plus a year ago with Montreal, and an 80 WRC plus this past year in Milwaukee. But certainly for a team like ours that has become pretty dependent on pitching, having a Gold Glove infielder in the middle of the infield for many years to come could be a great asset. Another guy who's going to be arbitration eligible next year, expected to make about $4 million. But certainly an intriguing option if we're going to try to take the pitching and defense approach to an even greater extreme than we already have. Last guy to mention is Jaquan Kelsaw, Ice Cream Kelsaw. Durable, some good personality traits, 50 stamina, and he's got a 3+ pitch arsenal, so he definitely could be a starting pitcher. Made it to the majors with Miami right at the end of last year after splitting the season between A ball, high A ball, and double A ball. Just turned 23 years old, number 41 prospect in baseball. Think he could be a very interesting player to consider as well. Before I look at the last couple players, when I do some player searches, want to just highlight a few other players who weren't necessarily listed as priorities for us based on what we claim we're looking for, but I think could still help us. One is the 26-year-old starter, Andres Flores, the Rat from Nashville. Has been in the majors for parts of the last couple seasons. Certainly another guy with a pretty impressive pitching profile. Actually, he's been in the majors for longer than that. Really good fastball and a solid splitter, slider, and curve. Certainly has been a productive major league pitcher, and with those extreme ground ball tendencies and incredible movement on his pitches, isn't going to give up a lot of home runs. Almost 27 years old and fragile physically, and he's already into his arbitration years. A plug-and-play guy who could help us immediately, but probably not someone I would be inclined to go after. Another guy I've looked at is Mike Smithmeyer of the Mets, 26-year-old left fielder. You can see he's got a pretty impressive hitting profile, going to draw a ton of walks, durable, great personality traits with the captain personality class. Hit .269 with 30 homers, 82 ribbies, 104 walks last year, 143 WRC plus. Making more money, almost $7 million this year, and he's going to likely be around 12 next year. But certainly another guy who would be a plug-and-play addition to the Major League roster. Getting into a few guys who are more prospects. Josh Dark, number 53 prospect in baseball, was picked 27th overall a year ago. 19-year-old in the Dodgers organization. Durable, great stamina, potentially a 4 or 5 pitch arsenal, 3 at a minimum. But if that changeup and or knuckle curve develop, his stuff could be excellent to go with really good movement and plus control. Certainly a bit more of a project than a lot of the other players we've looked at, but a left-handed arm that would certainly quickly become one of the top pitching prospects in our system. Another young pitcher we could pick up would be Luis Garza. You may remember him. He was an international free agent signing just about a year ago at this time that we were intrigued by. He's the number 65 prospect in baseball. Question with him is whether that curve and change will develop. If they do, he has the potential to be an absolutely devastating force on the mound. Was not great this year in his first year of professional ball and rookie ball, but he was also 17 years old when he was playing in the Dominican League. Number 65 prospect in baseball, certainly another interesting name to consider. And the last pitcher we're going to look at here is Norjay Carlos Burnside, 26-year-old, another guy who's further along in his career, making the minimum, but set to make close to $5 million in arbitration next year. Was an all-star this past year for the Orioles. All he did was lead the American League in ERA, BABIP, and WHIP. Now, leading the league in BABIP, not necessarily a great thing. Makes you think maybe he got a little bit lucky. But he's durable, an excellent fastball, and an excellent sinker combined with a decent changeup add up to above average stuff, excellent movement, and potentially excellent control. I think that he's a guy who could be a very useful pitcher for many years to come. And we also did a search for some higher end prospects who were competent defensively with plus bats in terms of contact, power, and eye potential. Unfortunately, a lot of these guys aren't eligible to be traded yet because they're either in international complexes or were just drafted this year. A couple of the more interesting ones, Bob Klein, a third baseman, durable, great arm, looks like he could have a pretty useful bat. Jeremy Rogers, a center fielder in the Blue Jays organization, number 25 prospect in baseball, has some speed, excellent bunter, good work ethic, decent outfield range, and a very well-rounded potential bat. Another guy, though, he was drafted 4th this year, so we can't actually trade for him quite yet, but he was an intriguing prospect to me. Jim Riker, another guy who's more ready to go. He's viewed as the number 3 prospect in baseball now, left-handed hitter, but he's kind of a more developed version of our guy who's the number 4 prospect and pretty well balanced. Not quite the same speed and also relatively mediocre defensively. But a left-handed hitter who hit .338 with 23 homers in limited time in AAA Oklahoma last year, and also added a .290 average with 18 homers in AA. So he started the season in Single A, where he played 5 games for some reason, or high A ball more accurately. But certainly a very interesting prospect in Riker. You know, the issue with trading for somebody like him, though, is that even if we include Burill, we still need to include another very important player on our team to get the deal done. Might not be the wrong decision to make, particularly with someone a little older like Jim Andrews, where we do have some depth in the infield. But as I said, Riker to me is just kind of a completely developed version of what we think Burill could potentially become. He's also a left-handed hitter rather than the right-handed hitter that Burill is. But I mentioned Burill's outfield range is better. He's got more speed. I just really question whether with that low adaptability and work ethic, whether Burill is going to ever develop to the level that Reichert has in terms of his batting ratings. And the last guy that I will mention, well, actually the second to last guy that I will mention on this list is Jesus Centeno, center fielder, number 13 prospect in baseball, a little younger than a lot of these other guys, 21 years old, like the high adaptability and work ethic, competent defensively, decent speed. If the bat fully develops, he's a very interesting hitter. My concern is that he's 21 years old, and we think his contact, home run power, and avoid strikeouts are all only at 25s in terms of his ratings relative to the majors. So I just question whether he's really going to get the massive development to reach his full potential that we think is still there, but no guarantees that he'll be able to make it happen. And given that we have been talking in the past about our old buddy Joe Gallagher, Navin Johnson, I thought it was kind of interesting that Steve Martin is also available. Looks like a good, solid major league hitter. number 2 prospect in baseball out of Vanderbilt. 23 years old, and he's only made it to A-ball. Did have 22 homers there. He is another guy, though, where when we add Burill into the deal, we also need to include a pretty good prospect to get the deal done. Again, it might not be the wrong move. He's a left-handed hitter, and I think there's a much higher chance with where he is today and that high adaptability and work ethic that Steve Martin reaches his potential compared to Burill, who's older and a lot further away from his potential and doesn't have some of the same positive personality traits. So another guy to consider. So a lot of interesting decisions to think about here. If you've got any real strong thoughts, as I mentioned, it'd be very useful for me to hear them. Not 100% convinced that we are going to trade Burill immediately, but I think I'm kind of leaning that way. I do fear that almost 24 years old with low adaptability and work ethic, the fact that he's still viewed as the number 4 prospect is intriguing to me, but I think this is likely peak Brenton Burill, and I think getting rid of him right now may be our opportunity to sell high. Any thoughts you have on what you would do in this situation are appreciated, and in our next episode, we'll be back with our decision on international amateur free agency. As I've mentioned to a few commenters, I think I'm leaning this year towards going maybe one guy on the higher end, one of these 4.5, 5-star potential everyday players to kind of come in strong with a real high bid from the start and maybe land them before the teams that can offer them $5.7 million that we can't compete with get involved. I think I'm leaning that way, but appreciate the feedback that some of you have shared on that as well. And we will make that decision, and we will make our trade decision in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.